Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to talk about how I relic a poly finish on a guitar. As you probably know, these kinds of finishes don't really relic. It's a really thick clear coat that takes a lot of beating. I have guitars that are somewhere around 30 years old and that have been played and used, that I've bought secondhand, and they have poly finishes, and they look like they are brand new guitars basically. There are a couple of things we need to talk about first before we get into how I did this relicing that you can see right here. And the first things are, you need something like a Squier Infinity, which is what I have right here. There is a video series of me fixing this guitar if you're interested. There are a couple of things that you need to know beforehand before you decide which guitar you're going to relic, if you're going to use my method. You could obviously try to modify what I'm going to talk about in this video, the kind of guitar you have, and see if you can get away with it, but there are some things that I'm going to tell you now that I know for a fact works on guitars like this one. And the first thing is that it needs to have a top layer of clear coat, and then the paint under, and then the last thing will be the sealer. I know that there are some budget guitars out there that have their paint job in a different way, where you could, for example, scrape away the actual paint and the clear coat and the sealer is under there, and so the guitar scratch very easily, but only the color, not the actual clear coat. That's not the case with a Strat like this. These guitars have a thick clear coat over and the paint is under. The next thing you need to know is that when you do damage and scratches into these guitars, you will get weird white lines. That's a part of it being in the clear coat. So you're gonna have to do what I did to remove those white lines. And if you have one of these guitars and you got a scratch or a ding or something, you probably know what I mean. So let's talk about what I have done. The first thing is, if you look at an old Strat, something from the 60s for example, one of those guitars that everyone is trying to mimic, the finish on those guitars are very thin. It's ridiculously thin. Sometimes I would even say that you can't really see if it has a clear coat or not, because the clear coat is such a thin that it's almost impossible to tell if it has one. That's not the case with polyester guitars. They actually have almost 0.5 mil of clear coat in some cases, which might sound like not a lot, but it is actually a lot. So what you need to do first is take the guitar apart, take the scratch plate and neck and strings and all the hardware off the body, and you need to sand it back down to remove most of the clear coat. And this is the key, most of the clear coat, not all of it. I suggest you go under the pickguard or somewhere where you won't really see, and you try to figure out by doing some test sanding just how far down you can go. And when you know, you sand the guitar with wet and dry sandpaper, somewhere around 2000. If you have a machine, this won't take that many hours, but it will be a lot of work. You sand the entire guitar until you have maybe removed, let's say 75% of the clear coat, and then you can polish and buff it up again and make it semi-glossy. It won't be the same glossy as it had back when the guitar was new and before you started to sand it. And then you can do some of the relic. Down on the bottom here, I've done the relicing by just hitting it against rocks outside in the garden, and that dings it up nicely. But then I have other marks like the relicing I have right here, and that is done by warming up the lacquer with a heat gun. Be careful with the heat gun. Make sure you don't warm up the pickguard. You shouldn't even have the pickguard on. And just warm up and start scraping it away. And do it carefully. You can draw with a pencil out the kind of mark you want, and then you remove it. And then you sand over the area to smooth it out so that you can feel it like a bump, but it's not like a dig in. And then you do that everywhere, except for right here, where you just use your sanding machine to go through all the layers down to where you meet the wood, because you have to think about how something relic. This area here will be relic by pick scratches until the finish removes. This area here will be relic by the guitar getting dings and smashed into stuff. These are the guitar being put down on something carelessly, and this area is your arm going up against it and being smoothed out. The same thing goes for the back. This sort of relic that you have right here, that's buckle rashes and dings from standing up playing the guitar. And so you have to try to mimic those kinds of marks and scratches to see if you can make it look real. So you heat up the lacquer with a heat gun. You have to keep it moving so that you don't burn the lacquer, and then you just slowly chip it away. It will be very easy to remove once it's warm, and then you let it cool down. You can also warm up the lacquer and hit it with something like a hammer, very carefully though, not like strike it with force, and you can get some small dents in it like these that I hope you can see I have right here. The next thing that I do, and this is the key, once you've done all these steps, your guitar will, if you've done it right, have all the marks in the right place and look really nice, but you'll have all these weird white lines along the paint where you've removed it, and in all the scratches and dings, and that's just because that's how the clear coat breaks. It becomes these small whites. And so what you need to do is you have to buy stain, but it has to be lacquer stain, which is basically like a spirit-based stain put together with some lacquer. You can find this in any hardware store. It's nothing special. You buy one that roughly at least matches the paint of your guitar. So I bought something brownish, dark brown, because that's what would work together with this guitar. And you take a pencil and you just color in all the scratches and dings and marks to fill in all those white lines and remove all those dings. And that's how you do it. And you just have to pay attention to where you've made those dings and where you've made those lines and fill them in. And then you let it dry, and then you can go back and forth and you can add dings and scratches, and you can heat up the plastic, and you can take something like a knife and press it in to the lacquer to make scratches, long scratches. As long as the lacquer is warm, it will bend after whatever shape you're using. So you can see, maybe if I move this, you can see I have some, especially around here where the horn is, you can see that there are some lines in the reflection. Those lines there are made by warming up the lacquer with a heat gun, and then before it cools down I just take a knife and I press the knife in. I don't drag it or scratch it or anything, I just use the knife edge to press in those lines. And since you have to think, you can't do just like 4 or 5 lines, you have to do like a couple of hundreds lines, because this is supposed to be lacquer that has been removed by playing the guitar for years. And if you've played the guitar for years, you probably hit the strings a couple of thousand times. You don't relic a guitar by just going, oh god, my guitar got relic. You have to actually play it for a really long time. So yes, that's basically how I did it. Now I'm gonna do a little tiny bit of relicing on this guitar, just to show you guys all the steps, except for the sanding. I've already done all the sanding on this guitar. Okay, so I decided that I'm gonna relic this corner here, because I feel like whenever I look at old guitars, there is always somewhere here. So first I'm gonna take a pencil, and I'm using white because that's easy to see, and I'm just gonna try to mark out what kind of relicing I want to do. And I want something like this, I think, that like takes off the lacquer on the corners and goes down here, something like that, and smooths this out a little bit and runs up here, because you're gonna remove these sharp edges, but then it's gonna move in a little bit because it's chipping off. So that's how I kind of try to think about how it should be relicing. And the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my heat gun and I'm gonna move around and warm it up. And I never stand still like this and just warm up, because that's gonna burn it, and if it gets burned, the whole thing is basically ruined. Then you're gonna have to start removing more than you actually want. And this is one of those cases where removing less is key. You really want to remove as little as possible, because otherwise you'll end up with one of those guitars that looks like, hey, why has it been battered to hell and totally destroyed? And that won't look good. So warm up and go around. And I'm just taking a razor blade, I'm taking it off, and I'm scraping in under it, and I'm trying to move the blade in all directions, just to get a sort of weird cracking pattern. You don't want it to be overly smooth in all directions. And here you can see the bubbling up of the lacquer. And then I just heat it up again, and I go back. I use the blade both to poke it up and remove it and scrape it away, and then also as a leveler to like smooth it out. And don't worry about these white lines, I'm going to show you how I remove them too. This is why I wanted to talk about this first in the video and then actually also show you guys, because I felt like maybe it'd be easier to show you. And because we have some of the clear coat left, we can still scrape and level the clear coat and make it look nice. And now I'm just going to take some wet and dry sandpaper and I'm going to sand to remove some of the scratches and dings, and just go back and forth with the sandpaper and try to smooth it out. And since we still have a lot of the clear coat left, we don't have to worry that much. It would be one thing if you removed all of the clear coat, but we have like 25% of it left or something, which is a lot if you think about how thick they actually are. So something like this, and then we'll just take this off and clean it up, and then we'll see if we have any scratches or dings that we want to sand back a bit. Okay, so now that I'm fairly happy with how this looks, I can see that there are some white little scratch marks and lines that you can maybe not see. I don't know if you can see it around this area. So now I have this stain that is lacquer stain, and so if I just put it on here and I just let it seep into all the little cracks and dings and marks and scratches that I have, it will be soaked up and it will disappear into all the little crevices. And you just have to move it around back and forth. You can see some lines left from the pencil, but just keep on moving it and it will work out fine. And you just leave it in there for a couple of seconds. You don't have to go overboard with it at all. And then we just take a piece of paper or something and we just remove the excess, and then we can just go back again and fill it in, and we'll keep doing that until we're perfectly happy with what it looks like. Anyway, I hope you liked what I showed you in this video, and I hope it helped you. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll talk to you guys in the comments if there are any questions or anything that was unclear, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Stay awesome and cool, and go out there and build something